coming. My feeling is that I should start maybe with a story. I know the Sufis have some stories I'm told. And the story I'd like to tell is about the 5 pairs of blind men and the elephant. All of a sudden, there are 5 pairs of blind men walking along, and they come on an elephant. The first blind man goes up to the elephant, feels the trunk, and announces, "The elephant is a hose." The second blind man comes up to the elephant, and he feels the leg and says, "The elephant is a tree." Then they proceed to have a real argument about whether the elephant is a hose or a tree. The next pair of blind men looks at this and says, "This is the limits of human perception. We'll never understand anything. We need to deal with this in a mystical thing. We don't need the elephant." That leaves us with the last 2 pairs. The last 2 pairs have a different philosophy. They're Americans, and as you know, we're very practical and realistic. So they decide you have to have a theory. You have to have a hypothesis. And the way you deal with a hypothesis is you just state it. It doesn't matter what hypothesis you have, they can be diametrically opposed. The only grounds for considering them is whether you can be convincing. And the ways you're convincing are by parsing the evidence, making your strongest point, not making any other points that might be challenged, and certainly not introducing the idea that there's other information. These last two, despite their philosophical agreement, always come to blows. Doing this sort of thing very often, defining things, parsing evidence where you can understand who the person is by what they tell you the truth is and what they've discovered, I think is a universal problem. And it's been particularly a problem in the case of Islam today, and in the case of Hinduism, so-called Hinduism, where increasing definition of who is this and who is not this has led to all sorts of conflicts. My take is a little bit different. Just allow me a minute to get my slides up. As you saw there, I gave a presentation of many different types of images. Unlike the other blind men, and I admit I'm blind and ignorant, I don't talk to other people. I talk to pictures. And so for the last 2 months, as I woke up every morning, I went and looked at the 17th century picture to try to see what it could tell me. It led me to think about other things related to Sufism. Not necessarily paintings and images in my own collection. I was very impressed with this painting because it deals with a very interesting concept that there is actually a prophet who attained his knowledge from God and revealed mystical secrets to Moses, and who may represent in Sufi thought the inner light, which is parallel and contrasted to the legalistic aspects of prophecy which are related to prophets like Moses. And my conclusion from this is that the outward form of Islam is Islamic law, Sharia, and the inner approach is the Sufi path, and God is the reality. This wonderful Mogul painting leads me to another conclusion, that it's just not knowing the words, it's how you accept them emotionally that's important. In this painting, a preacher, his words are falling on deaf ears. They hear him, but they don't really feel what he says. And somebody is absolutely moved by his words, and you can see it at the bottom. with his sleeves flying, dancing wildly. And this is associated with the Quranic idea that there are people in paradise who will be arranged in 3 rows, those who believe. The next row, the higher row, being those who have spiritual wisdom, and the highest row, those who are nearest to God. Now people say to me, that's all very nice. You have a bunch of old paintings. Those were the days when Sufism was a reality and had no name. Now, Sufism has a name, but there's no reality. I submit to you that Sufism has a reality today and a purpose today, which is to have love towards everyone, malice towards none, and peace with all. With that in mind, I'd like to call up 3 people. Kadim Il-Milad Pir Saeed Razuddin Shishti and Haji Saeed Salman Shishti from the Shishti Sufi Shrine of Ajmer Sharif, the blessed seat of the Shishti Sufi order in South Asia, and their friend, the peace advocate, Jonathan Granoff, to say a few words. Please.
Let me thank everybody who's present here and the people who made it possible for us to come here and share what we have learned all our life. Being born and raised in one of the most important Sufi shrine of South Asia, Ajmer Sharif, which happened to be the blessed seat of Chishti Sufi order from last 800 years. We thank Dr. Walter Anderson, Associate Director, South Asia Studies Program, John Hopkins University, Dr. Kenneth Robbins, who's Board of Director in Friends of Asian Division Library of Congress, and Professor Carl Ernst, who's not present at the moment but will join us shortly, who connected us with Professor Ken and Dr. Walter. And of course, Mr. Abdullah Harun Hussain, who has graced this occasion and shared his knowledge with us. Now, Professor Anderson has thanked everybody who's been here and asked us to start an invocation of peace that we have been doing every day in Ajmer Sharif, not for the people of South Asia, but for the people of the whole world. Because Ajmer Sharif is a place where people come not only from South Asia, but from all over the world, and they relate to the spiritual significance of Ajmer Sharif. And as Ken has mentioned about the name and the reality, I think it's a very crucial time that the Sufis, who have done the great service to humanity in the past, and at the present it's required that the message goes across to the people who are responsible for bringing back the peace that is most required in today's time. So I would like to ask Sayyid Riyazuddin Chishti Sahab to come and start the invocation of prayer of peace.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqin wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa alihi tayyibin wa ashabihi tahirin wa ala muhyi sunnatihi Shaykh Muinuddin Chishti Imam at-Tariqati wal awliya al-kamilin. Amma ba'd, fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim. Sadaqallahul azim. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna 'alan nabi. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala ali sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim. Sallu alayhi salatan wa salamun alayka ya Rasulullah. Sibqatullah wa man ahsanu min Allahi sibqa wa nahnu lahu abidun. Du'a khair तंदुरुस्ती जान, सलामती ईमान, दीनी व दुनियावी हरकत, मुश्किलें आसान। अल्लाहुम्मा व या कादी अल हाजात, अल्लाहुम्मा व या राफी अल दराजात, अल्लाहुम्मा व या दाफी अल बलैयात, अल्लाहुम्मा व या काफी अल मुहिम्मात, अल्लाहुम्मा व या हल अल मुश्किलात, अल्लाहुम्मा या मुजीबुद दावात, अल्लाहुम्मा व या शाफी अल अमराद, अल्लाहुम्मा व या खैरुन नासिरीन, अल्लाहुम्मा व या दलील अल मुतahhirin, अल्लाहुम्मा व या गियास अल मुस्तगीसीन, अल्लाहुम्मा व या मुक़ल्लिबल क़ुलूब वल अब्सार, या मुइनुद्दीन मुइनुल हक़ आइन्ना बिइज़्निल्लाह, या मुइनुद्दीन मुइनुल हक़ आइन्ना बिइज़्निल्लाह, या मुइनुद्दीन मुइनुल हक़ आइन्ना बिइज़्निल्लाह। या अल्लाह, या रहमान, या रहीम। आज चिश्ती सूफीज़म पर जो कॉन्फ्रेंस यहाँ पर मुनक़िद की गई, या अल्लाह इसको कामयाबी से हमकिनार फरमा। या अल्लाह, जितने भी लोग पीस के लिए कोशिशें कर रहे हैं, यूनिवर्सल ह्यूमन ब्रदरहुड के लिए कोशिशें कर रहे हैं, तो उनकी कोशिशों को कामयाब तक पहुँचा दे मौला। मौला करीम, जितने लोग जालिमों के तशद्दुद का शिकार हुए हैं दुनिया में, जिन्होंने मासूमों का कत्ल किया, बेगुनाहों का कत्ल किया, सूफी श्राइन्स पर बम ब्लास्ट किए और उसमें बेगुनाह मारे गए, या अल्लाह, तो उन सब की मग़फ़िरत फरमा, उन सब की आत्मा को शांति पहुंचा और जालिमों को नेक हिदायत कर और सूफियत के रास्ते पर, चिश्तियत के रास्ते पर उनको लेकर आ। पाकिस्तान में, हिंदुस्तान में और दुनिया में जहाँ जहाँ भी जुल्म सितम हुआ बेगुनाहों पर, जिनके हाथों में हथियार नहीं थे, दे हैव नो आर्म्स एंड एमुनेशन, लेकिन फिर भी उनको कत्ल कर दिया गया, उनको आत्मा को शांति दे और उनको मग़फ़िरत फरमा और उनको जन्नत में जगह अता फरमा। मौला, मौला करीम, तू करीम है, तू रहीम है, रहम फरमा, करम फरमा। अस्सलातु वस्सलामु अलैका या रसूलल्लाह, अस्सलातु वस्सलामु अलैका या नबी अल्लाह, अस्सलातु वस्सलामु अलैका या हबीब अल्लाह। हम सब एक बार, जितने लोग मेरी ज़ुबान को समझ रहे हैं, सरकार अबद करार मदीने के ताजदार, हमासियों के सरदार हुजूर मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की बारगाह में दुरूद पाक का नजराना पेश करें उन लोगों की मग़फ़िरत के लिए, उन लोगों की आत्मा की शांति के लिए जो जालिमों का और टेररिस्ट का शिकार हुए और अपनी जानें दी। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला सय्यदिना व मौलाना मुहम्मदिन व अला आलि सय्यदिना व मौलाना मुहम्मदिन व बारिक व सल्लिम। In the end, I will say, अगर गेती सरासर बात गिरत, चरागे चिश्तियाँ हरगिज न मीरत, इलाही ताबुत खुर्शीद माही, चरागे चिश्तियाँ रा रोशनाई। अल्लाहु अकबर, अल्लाहु अकबर, अल्लाहु अकबर, अल्लाहु अकबर, बहक़ ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह मुहम्मदुर रसूलुल्लाह। Thank you.
That's what was prayed for. Now, another key point that we'd like to say in this meeting is that in the year 2012, that's the next year, is the 800th Urs celebration of Hazrat Khaja Muinuddin Chishti. And from last 800 years, we have been celebrating love, life, spirituality with the masses, not only with individuals, but with the masses. And every year, with this gathering, over 1 million people gather at May Sharif and celebrate life with the love of the divine. So being the 800th year, which is a landmark with the Chishti Tariqa, it's very important for the Chishtis to acknowledge this and to share this celebration, not with the people who are in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, but to share the celebration with the whole world. And we initiated this talk with my dear friend and my brother, Mr. Jonathan Granoff, about sharing this with the whole world. And he proposed an idea that why don't we celebrate this at the United Nations General Assembly Hall if we get through all the clearance required to do in next year in 2012. So inshallah, if everything happens, then we'll be back again celebrating the love, life and spirituality. And I would like to ask Brother Jonathan Randolph, to come and please share this vision with the people here and the efforts that we all have combined and come together.
Thank you. Thank God for bringing us here to share a message of hope and goodness and unity. The heart without the hand will certainly wither. And the hand without the heart can be very dangerous. But when the two come together, then the salt of suffering in a world of division, betrayal, and violence is transformed into the sugar of service and compassion and unity. So when I saw the horrible things that were being done in South Asia to a tradition that proclaims the unity of humanity, the intrinsic blessing of love and compassion that is the birthright of every human being, when I saw that that tradition, the shrines of the Sufi masters of India and Pakistan, were being assaulted by people who are blind, fearful, and ignorant, it hurt my heart, because I've been very touched and moved by that message. I believe it's not a message of the East or the West. It's not a message of the secret or the manifest. It's a message that at every level people can understand. And if you go to Ajmer, as I was blessed to do, where these wonderful people come from, you can see Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, all celebrating that which makes humanity beautiful, which is our love. And that these would be assaulted, I thought, well, we must do something. So I spoke with Ambassador Harun about, we have to do something. And he just leaped and inspired me to go forward, but I didn't know what might be done. And he said, what do you think we should do? And I said, I really don't know. But it happened that I was going to India to work on nuclear disarmament issues. And I had a few days. And I went to Ajmer, and I was hosted by these wonderful people who had really taken the Prophet's admonition to be a rahmatul alameen, a blessing upon all of creation, not just on Muslims. And they greeted this American lawyer as a brother. And when I was there, I said, you know, it's the 800th anniversary of the union of Khaja Muinuddin Chishti, whose message stretches between India and Pakistan. What if we could have a celebration at the United Nations, a celebration of love, and affirm this message, this beautiful message for all of humanity? And I spoke with the Deputy Permanent Representative of India, and he leaped at the idea. So with God's blessing, and with maybe work and some of you who are here, and certainly with the leadership of Ambassador Harun, at the United Nations for in 2012, to make a celebration for all humanity, that the message of all of the Sufis, the message of all of the saints and the wise since time immemorial, that humanity is one family. But now, in this day and age, that spiritual admonition has become a practical necessity. And our hearts all know it. The walls between us, the divisions amongst humanity have to be lowered, and our human unity has to be affirmed. May God's blessing that has brought us together today here make that happen, and make that love spread, and make that alive in our hearts. Thank you very much.
Philosophy. I will mention this briefly when I touch upon my own province of sin. And I then take a second point of it. Sufism comes close to it in some of the forms developed by the Ibn Arabi school. So we do not deny that it has. And for anyone to believe that any of this is monogamous in nature, every religion is not possible for any religion to bind itself. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the fiqhs, the various different approaches, by the thousands. Religion, ladies and gentlemen, is not a glue. It is a divisive force. And it manifests itself all over the world. The Eastern Church to the Western Church. The Coptic Aramaic, so many other names I can take, versus the Roman Catholic Church. The creation of the Inquisition to reform the church, in actuality, a banishment of Muslim and Jewry or Judaism from Spain. The aspect of Martin Luther nailing his 90 Theses to the door at Wittenberg show that a Leo Medici cannot head a church which says, when you hear the coin in the coffer ring, thy soul from purgatory spring. And you can go on and on and on, not to display anything else, but that in Islam, in Judaism, and in Christianity, the monogamous religions, the greatest problem has always been a unanimity. And that's why in comes Islam, with a strong, very strong message that seeks to put forward the unity of faith. There has been, of course, various deviations from this, but that does not take away from the initial invocation. The religious conscience of Islam is centered upon a fact of meta-history. And meta-history I speak about by explaining to you that before creation, this is said, God called the future humanity out of the loins of the non-yet created Adam and addressed them with the words, "Am I not your Lord? Alastu bi rabbikum?" And they answered, "Yes, we witness it. Bala shahidana," we witness it. This idea of this primordial covenant between God and humanity has impressed the religious conscience of the Muslim, and the Muslim mystics specifically, more than any other idea. This is what leads towards what you are now watching in its developmental form. And I think that in many ways, the important aspect in this is, and I don't want to go into this too far, the new speaker has arrived, much prior to what we thought it would take him to get here from Baltimore. I am going to take you to one last phase and explain that this covenant between God and man was the aspect that opened the doors to Sufism. And I go towards the covenant to celebrate between God and man in Sufism that is then built through the Sama, which you will hear in the invocation later today. This particular covenant takes on an importance where Rumi, I think, emphasizes it in a beautiful way, and he spells it out by saying, "A call reached not being said, yes, yes, Bala. I shall put my foot on that side, fresh and green and joyful. It heard the last. It came forth running and intoxicated. It was not being and became being. Tulips and willows and sweet basil." And then he rejoices it by saying, "Sound drum and mellow flute resounding Allahu. Dance ruddy dawn in gladness bounding Allahu. Sound exalted in the center, O streaming light, soul of all reeling planets rounding Allah." And that is the rejoicement of that, the way it introduced itself. I was not going into this. I was to take another path. I was instructed to speak about basically Sufism in South Asia. Why Sufism? Sufism because most of you may have heard and believed that Islam spread by the sword. Yet the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, does not enter Mecca with a sword drawn. And in his lifetime, basically, speaks to those around him who do not believe by invoking the worthiness of God, the worthiness of his Creator, the love for his Creator. And I think when most of you read about an Islam, you actually read about a time when the great Ottoman Sultan was on the gates of Vienna threatening the very lord of Europe, the Emperor Charles V of the Habsburg Empire. What you don't realize, why did Islam not cross Vienna when it had the power to? And at that very moment, why didn't Islam protect and lose when it had the power to? And the answers to both questions is because it never intended to. Same way as Christianity and Islam both never penetrated what the United Nations is now dividing Southern Sudan into, therefore, between Ethiopia and Sudan, because the slaves that were to be exported to the east all had to come from somewhere. If they were Christian or Muslim, it became difficult to make them slaves, because both religions spoke of piety. So the slaves were taken in. And today, therefore, is going to get its independence, so they say, through the United Nations, because they're oil rich. God has endowed them with oil. And they can finally make it. And 500,000 of them have been killed, because neither Muslim nor Christian want to take that responsibility. Because where were the slaves go? Coming back to the particular aspect, that what is it that happened? And what happened is that the child, Bayezid, born out of an Ottoman prince in the last days of the Mamluk Egyptian Caliphate, returned as a brilliant general. He was so brilliant that Solomon the Magnificent thought, my God, he'll remove me and take my place. So by consensus, he was given as slave or prisoner to Leo X, who heartily endorsed his being kept as a prisoner in the Castel-Angelo, because he got 40,000 ducats a year to keep him there from the Sultan of the great Ottoman Empire. So Vienna was not taken. And while the last Umayyad Caliph screamed for help, and the Ottoman was using Barbarossa, he did not help the Granada from falling and the Sultan being sent to Fez, because it was not prudent. He was busy attacking the Mamelukes of Cairo, so he could take that as part of his empire. And because the Sufi of Iran was giving him trouble, and he didn't want to expose his flanks to him, and because Temur the Lane was wanting to be recognized as an equal, and he was not willing to do that. There are all your explanations. But you know who advanced Islam everywhere? Yasawi, Central Asia. Rumi, Turkey. Bektash, Eastern Europe. Nuri in Idris, North Africa, within the Arabian Peninsula itself. Ghazali, Ibn Arabi in the Andalus for a long time, Spain, and so many others, Abdul Qadir Gilani, the Hamdanis, opened the door for so many, including the Jews themselves. What I am trying to say to you that Islam, Allama Iqbal speaks of the fact, he says that Islam spread through a two-pronged attack of the Zarbi Yadullahi, the sword of Islam, or the Sijda Shabi, or the martyrdom, the one who gives himself up in the way of God. And basically the Sufi, and I have named all those who created the diaspora of Islam, and I haven't yet come to South Asia, so that's what I'm going to speak about, if I'm given the time, on that particular subject. I'm sorry, Kenneth invoked something, Jonathan said something, Walter raised a few points, and I thought I'd try and pin them up to give to you a more easily understood aspect. I will just go to that by saying one of the earliest, Bibi Rabia, some say Basri, some say Alawi, rushing around Basra with a pure water and with a flame. And the true Sufi, she stopped and asked, "What are you doing? This is outrageous." She said, "I seek heaven and hell to cool the fire of hell with this pure water and burn heaven so that people can love my Creator for just being himself." And that is where Sufism manifests itself. The extreme outreach of love. And when the great Ghazali went to Mecca after 14 years of going through sand and desert, and he takes himself to the Kaaba and finds it missing that particular day, he raises his hands in supplication and says, "My Lord, I have come to pay my respects. Your house is no longer here." Actually, it was a vision of the house not being there. The answer he notes in his books and writings is, the Lord says, "You have not met Rabia. She is coming to my house to pay her respects. My house will welcome her on the outskirts of Mecca." That is the strength. To a very small way, I explain to you the strength of the Sufi. In India, no orthodox, no mullah, no message permeated. You had the earlier invasions in the western sector of India, what is now South Asia, and you had the later excursions by the Ghaznavid and the Khorid factions, invasions which had little impact on the religion of people. I think, but at the same time, the overwhelming conversion in Islam in India and South Asia came with the advent of the Sufis. And the greatest house in that is the Chishtiya house, and it is followed secondly by the Suhrawardiya or the Naqshbandi. The only difference is that the Suhrawardiya and the Naqshbandi went ahead to Malaysia, they went ahead to Indonesia, but the Chishtiya house remained exclusively in India. They never gave up what was what I consider their most important belief. In about 905, unknown to many people, Hallaj visited Sindh, and he blessed it in such a strange and odd way. My province of Sindh attracted the most amazing people. I'm not even going to invoke big names like the Nabandi Qalandar, or I am not going to speak of Shah Abdul Latif. Please can speak such sermons. Let me tell you of names you don't know. The King of Yemen comes in with his Prime Minister and decides to give up his kingship and remains behind and recognizes Shah Sultan Diwan in the time of Umar Surra, and buried in Delhi. Just didn't want to be king anymore. He touched this land. You hear of the great Hindu king from Punjab, Raja Mubat Rai, who comes to
the centuries. He has brought to bear his sober influence on the aggressive and acquisitive instinct of man. We are living in an age of crisis. We are living in age of crisis. The roots of the crisis go deep into the political, social, economic, religious and spiritual fibers. But the real crisis is spiritual. To resolve the spiritual crisis, material means are not effective. The survival of our civilization depends on the survival of spiritual values. We are trying to win battles by new weapons, but it appears that we are content to lose the battle on the spiritual front. We have to choose between darkness and light, between personal interest and social interest, between vanity and meekness, between arrogance and humbleness, between love and hatred, between personal sacrifice and social good, between the tradition of social trusteeship of wealth and ostentatious display and abuse of riches, between moral and ethical traditions and the zeal for mass methods, between the way that leads to spiritual death and the way that leads to eternal life, and between our personal will and then the divine will. The teachings of Khaja Moinuddin Chishti are capable of giving faith, freedom and goodness to the people. Our master ambition should be to follow his teaching. Hazrat Khaja Moinuddin Chishti is torch-bearer of the message of Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in India. What was the message? It was the message of love, peace, tolerance, universal brotherhood, amity, goodwill. It was the message of liberty, equality and fraternity. Here are some sayings of Khaja Moinuddin Chishti. A friend of God must have affection like the sun. When the sun rises, it is beneficial to all, irrespective of whether they are Muslim, Christian or Hindu. A friend of God must be generous like a river. We all get water from river to quench our thirst. It does not discriminate whether we are good or bad, or we are a relation or a stranger. A friend of God must display the hospitality like the earth. We are raised and cradled into lap, and yet it always our feet. The noise of the lover is only why he has not seen his beloved. Once he sees the beloved, he becomes calm and quiet, just as the rivers are boisterous before they join the ocean, but when they do so, they are become forever. The enlightened becomes perfect only when all else is removed from in between him and friend. Either he remains or the friend. Whosoever receive any blessing received from due to his generosity. Yeah, you can see your ishara. So, just a minute. The members of the Chishti order have adopted some principal stages and have made from their customary line of action. The stage is that helpers, which refers to Adam. The stage of abstainers, which is the stage of Enoch. The stage is that of devotees, which refers to Moses. The stage is that of the patient ones, which refers to Job. The stage is that of those resigned to the will of God, which refers to Jesus. The stage is that of the contented ones, which refers to the great Jacob. The stage is that of the defenders of the faith, which refers to Jonah. The stage is that of the thinker, which refers to yourself, you Joseph. The stage is that of the afflicted, which refers to Shoaib, Jethro. The stage is that of the righteous ones, which refers to Noah. The stage is that of the sincere ones, which refers to David. The stage is that of the illuminated one, which Khidr. The stage is that of the grateful ones, which refers to Abraham. The stage is that of the lovers, which refers to Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If a darwish, with the help of the teaching of the spiritual master, is not aware of the above mentioned stages, he is only a beginner. बगैर ताबे बलाफ्ता द कश्ती ज़ईफ़ाओं शिकस्तारा तो कुश्ती बहक के ख्वाजा उस्मान हारूनी मदद दुनिया मोइनुद्दीन चिश्ती इलाही ताबुअत खुर्शीद व माही चरागे चिश्तियाँ रा रोशनाई अगर गेती सरासर बाद गिरत चरागे चिश्तियाँ हरगिज नमीरत वस्सलाम. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful emotional and descriptive view of the Chishti movement. We'll take a 10-minute break.
In tottering civilization, realized the need of a different setup. This led him to strengthen the democratic foundation by giving them social solidarity. He gave up the gift of soul, which is itself a great and lasting contribution to human happiness. Let us then choose in all humility and with all sincerity the path shown to us by Khaja Muinuddin Chishti and the Sufi masters. There is a rubai of Khaja Muinuddin Chishti that we recommend and then that we speak to the people who are coming to seek blessing. And people belonging to different school of thoughts and different spread of society comes in and kiss the threshold to seek the blessing with these words within the recite. Baghdad banafta bikashti zaifan wa shikistara tukushti Bahak ke Khaja Usman Haruni madad dunya moinuddin. The translation runs as, the board has been besieged with whirlpool of calamity, though are the helper to the lowly, the lost who are denied prosperity. For the truth that is the Khaja Usman Haruni, who was the spiritual master of Khaja Muinuddin Chishti, in all solemnity, O Muinuddin, guide us and help us. Lastly, I will just end up with the last sermon of Khaja Muinuddin Chishti that I do in all my presentation, and which has been the guiding principle for the Chishti Khadims of Idmeshwari. And if anybody wants to take some notes from this, this is a very important khutbah which he delivered one month before he passed away to the other world. Love all and hate none. Mere talk of peace will avail you not. Mere talk of God and religion will not take you far. Bring out all the latent powers of your being and reveal the full magnificence of your immortal self. Be surcharged with peace and joy and scatter them wherever you are and wherever you go. Be a blazing fire of truth, be a beauteous blossom of love, and be a soothing balm of peace. With your spiritual light, dispel the darkness of ignorance, dissolve the clouds of discord and war, and spread goodwill, peace, harmony among the people. Never seek any help, charity, or favors from anybody except God. Never go to the courts of the king, but never refuse to bless and help the needy and the poor, the widow, the orphan, if they come to your door. This is your mission to serve the people. Carry out dutifully and courageously, so that I, as your Pir Murshid, may not be ashamed by any shortcomings on your part before the Almighty God and our holy predecessor in the Sufi order on the Day of Judgment. That was Khaja Muinuddin Chishti spoke last in the 11th century to all his followers, and that's what we've been believing and serving for the last 100 years. think I've exceeded my time. I don't know about that, but we pray that this gathering and much more gatherings like this reach the heart of the listeners, and through the heart of the listeners reaches the people they can come to practice. And that's from us, and I would just like to call Rajan this out to share a few saving words and conclude it with a prayer from them. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.